Hi there, I'm Mike, and what I have for you today is Star Wars The Black Series Deluxe Hasbro Pulse exclusive Cad Bane and Todo 360. I'm very excited to get into this review. I've been looking forward to this figure for a while. So let's go ahead and take a look at a picture of him while I read the bio on the back of the box. A ruthless bounty hunter from the planet Duro. No query was too dangerous for Cad Bane, if the price was right. So this here is the Hasbro Pulse exclusive edition. I think it was also like a European convention exclusive, but there weren't any conventions this year, so they just kind of all went online. But if you're watching this and you only own the regular version, this still applies. So keep watching. So Cad Bane was first introduced at the end of season 1 of Star Wars The Clone Wars. He was actually hired by the Hutt cartel to steal a different Hutt from Coruscant. In the show, he's constantly shown to be outwitting and evenly matched against Jedi, and that's one of the reasons why I love Cad Bane. I mean, he gave Obi-Wan Kenobi and Quinlan Vos a run for their money, and all he has are his blasters and his cute little rocket boots. That's just straight skill right there. Suffice it to say, Cad Bane is my absolute favorite bounty hunter in all of Star Wars, both in terms of skill and accomplishments, and he looks like a badass alien cowboy. What's not to like? Speaking of looks, here I have him out of the package. So Cad Bane is a Duros, or Durosian, which is one of my favorite aliens in all of Star Wars. I would say that Hasbro has successfully recreated his signature looks down to the 6-inch scale. We have his wide-brimmed hat, we have his duster, and his cute little cheek hoses that I guess help him breathe in places he shouldn't be able to breathe in. So while he did sport a couple of different looks over the course of the Clone Wars and the episode arcs that he was in, this is the outfit he was wearing, I would say like 80 or 90% of the time. So I'm glad they went with this first before we went to anything else, because like why? Why would you? But who knows, Hasbro's made some questionable choices before. But I just absolutely love this aesthetic to death, and I'm so glad that Hasbro delivered us just the raw Cad Bane that we so wanted. Under his hat, he actually has a fantastic face sculpt. Luckily for him, he doesn't have the burden of having to look like a specific actor. He just kind of has to look like Cad Bane, but Cad Bane has just been animated. So there's nothing they have to really get like spot on, but they still do. This is spot on Cad Bane. I also love the kind of scowl he's got going on. It really shows off his personality rather than just kind of a blank face. I'm glad they went with that for this. But speaking of under the hat, let's take a look at his accessories. Firstly, he comes with his trusty LL30 blaster pistols. They're small handheld pistols that are silver, mostly in color, with a couple of paint apps on the barrel and the handle. They've got a decent amount of molded detail in there with the barrel, the scope, the handle. Those are the different parts of the gun I'm labeling. And it actually fits very nicely into his hand, albeit with very poor trigger discipline. His hands are molded to gently cup and caress the blaster as he kills people with it. And if he doesn't want to hold it, it does fit nicely into the holsters on his legs. Next, he comes with his signature hat. I count it as an accessory because it is removable and can be lost. Cad Bane is barely Cad Bane without his hat. Throughout the entire series, he's made it apparent that his hat is his most important feature. There's almost no wrong way to put this hat on his head. No, I take that back. There's a couple of different wrong ways. The hat itself is molded out of a soft rubber. It has some paint apps on the actual hat itself, and then the brim has sort of a wash on it over the molded detail to make it look worn. The hat looks great on his head. It looks great in his hands. I just can't get over how much I love the hat, and they nailed it. If they hadn't nailed the hat, they wouldn't have nailed Cad Bane at all. In that same vein, because it's removable, he also does come with this bag. It's just a fun little extra kind of flavor accessory. He doesn't have to have it to complete his look, but he does have it in the cartoon. It slips right off his head if you don't want it on. It's basically just a long strap with a bag molded that sits on his back. It's got some detailing on there, but there's not any paint apps at all. So like I said, you can take it off, but I never will, because he is rocking this purse. And lastly, if you have the deluxe version, you do get Todo 360. So like always, if they come with a fun little character, I'm gonna give it its own little mini review. So mini review time. Todo 360 or Todo 360, why would you say that? Todo 360 is Cad Bane's faithful little droid sidekick. He's voiced by Seth Green in the cartoon, and he is the bomb.
Oh, hey guys. I was just, testing the access hatch. Works great.
Bomb!
Bomb? What bomb? Is there something going to blow up?
Bomb!
No.
So while you look at a picture of him, I'm going to go ahead and read his bio. Cad Bane's Techno Service Droid had many built-in gadgets that made him incredibly useful, but he also had an attitude to match. Seriously, who writes these? So in terms of his looks, I would say it looks like he just stepped right out of the cartoon. They've got the proportions right, they've got the detailing right. He's got his gigantic head, he's got his chubby little robot tummy, and he's got his big paddle feet. In terms of accessories, he is one, so he doesn't come with any. I would have liked to have seen some little flame effects to go on the bottom of his feet because he does use those to fly. It would have just been nice to have that as an option for displaying. I know that's asking a lot because it's literally just a tiny throw-in accessory, but I mean, come on. So how does this little bad boy move? Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Todo's head is on a ball joint. It swivels all the way around, up and down. Both arms are also on a ball joint and it swivels all the way around. His tummy is a swivel and it moves back and forth like this. His hip is on a ball joint and it moves all the way around. And then his foot is also on a ball joint and it moves all the way around. With this being Todo 360's widest stance with both his feet flat on the ground. So Todo's basically all ball joints. His head, his shoulders, his legs, his feet, everything's a ball joint. So you can easily get him standing up, but he is top heavy. So if you don't have him standing up right, he's gonna fall over. Sometimes it's easier just to put him on his head because that is a nice solid base and it doesn't fall over. As much as I love the articulation on this little guy, I would have liked if they could work in elbow or knee articulation. There's a couple different times, especially with like elbow, like I would like him waving or something, but he can't because his arms only move at the shoulder. Again, I know it's asking for a lot. He's just a little accessory, but I would have liked a little bit more articulation out of him. In terms of paint and sculpt, there's not a lot of paint, but there is a lot of sculpt. He has these long, swooping, slender designs. He basically looks like a toaster, but a toaster from the 1920s, but a toaster in the 1920s that was made to look like it was from the future. How the 1920s saw the future, basically. So again, lots of great molded details. He does have the yellow on his eyes that really kind of pop. It looks like they come to life. And he does have some molded slits down the middle of his body, all the way down to his robot belly button, and that's painted in. But other than that, that's pretty much it, but it's enough. And finally, we have want and availability. The answer to wanting this is, of course. I love droids, and this is Cad Bane's sidekick. And while he did get blown up in an arc, he was in other arcs, which implies that either those took place beforehand or Cad Bane rebuilt him at some point. Either way, if you watch the Clone Wars and you like Cad Bane, odds are you do want this little guy as well. The problem here is getting it. The only way to get it is to get this deluxe edition right here, and the only way to get that was in a very small window on Hasbro Pulse, or a slightly different way if you live in Europe. It wasn't available very long. If you weren't paying attention, you probably missed it. So getting him sucks, so not very available, even a little bit. My final score on this little guy, I would give him a 3 out of 5. Could he be better? Yes. But is he fun? Still yes. I like him, and it does make a worthwhile addition to this set. Back to Cad Bane, that is all he comes with. Again, if you can't get the deluxe version, you can't get the regular version. It's the same as this, sans Todo 360. And while he does come with a decent amount of stuff, I kind of wish he came with a little more. Some very wishful thinking, an alternate head with an alternate expression would be nice. Maybe his toothpick. Of course, alternate hands would be ideal. I mean, splayed hands, bald hands. I only bring this up because in almost every other line that Hasbro does, they have lots of alternate hands. Power Rangers, Marvel Legends, G.I. Joe, all of those lines that I mentioned have many figures with alternate hands and heads. So again, it would be nice to see that happen more in the Black Series line. It would just give a lot of different display options, which is nice. But I think what have really benefited this the most, especially as the deluxe version, are some blast effects. Maybe blaster blast effects to make it look like he's actually shooting something, but mostly the blast effects down here for his rocket boots. He flies a lot in the Clone Wars. He uses them all the time. It would be cool to pop him and his buddy Todo 360 with their jets coming off their little boosters on the new flight stands that Hasbro released during Hasbro PulseCon that I definitely bought. It would be cool if they'd have that as just a little extra, but they didn't. And that kind of sucks. But not enough to really get the figure down even a little bit. I mean, he still comes with a lot. Next, let's take a look at Cad Bane's articulation. His neck has a double ball joint at the base of the skull and at the base of the shoulders. It has a wide range of movement. It moves forward this far, back that far, and it has a pretty good waggle. His shoulders have a butterfly joint that allows it to move back and forth like this. Moves out this far, all the way around. He has a deep bend at the elbow, as well as a swivel. He has a swivel at the wrist, as well as a hinge. He has a torso joint that moves back and forth. It moves forward not very far, back pretty far. His leg moves all the way forward, not very far back. He has an upper thigh swivel, a single jointed bend at the knee, as well as a swivel at the knee. He has a swivel at the rocket boot, a hinge at the ankle, as well as a rocker. With this being Cad Bane's widest stance with both his feet flat on the ground. So he has all the hallmarks of a 2020 figure. That is the double jointed neck, the butterfly shoulders, the improved elbow articulation, the new knees, which I absolutely love. They grew on me. I didn't like them at first. I felt they hindered articulation, but they don't. They don't really hinder the range of movement in any meaningful way. But when he is standing in certain positions, you can't even see that knee joint anymore. So I love that. And while I do like a lot of this articulation, it's not perfect. Mostly in the elbows and the wrists. Now, I know earlier I said he's got that deep elbow bend, and he does, but I would have liked to see it bend a little bit more just because one of his famous poses is him grabbing his hat. He does it all the time. And yes, you can't put him in that pose here, but another pose I would have liked to have seen is pushing up the brim of his hat with his gun, and the elbow and the wrist just don't bend quite far enough to be able to pull that off. I know it's a weird nitpick, but for some reason, I really want to do that with this figure. I really want to put him in that pose, and I just can't. It's like just slightly not there, and it's so close, I feel like, come on. But that aside, you can get him into some cool poses. First of all, just having him stand there statically will make him look cool. Likewise, having him in an action stance, guns akimbo, looks rad. Or even flying up in the air on one of those flight stands. I honestly love it. It's really hard to get him in a bad pose. That's just how cool he looks. I just wish his hands hinged a little bit more deeply, that's all. So now we've come to the bulk of this review, the paint and sculpt and the detail of it, because there's just so much here. I've already talked about his hat and how much I love his hat and how important his hat was to the figure working at all. Underneath the hat, I've even talked about the face. The face has some great sculpting with that scowl, even has sculpted ridges in his eyebrows to make him look like he's kind of, I love what they've done here with the sculpt. The paint looks spot on. The blue of his face, the red of his eyes, all that stuff looks great. He's got those molded cheek hoses that connect to a little canister on the back. There's no paint on that, but it is molded very well with some detail in it. Moving down, we have his duster. His duster is another one of those iconic pieces of his. That's how you get that classic Cad Bane look. And again, if it wasn't done properly, it wouldn't have worked. In this case, we went with a soft sculpted rubber over a torso. I know a lot of people really love soft goods, but I think in this, soft goods would not have worked. At this level, it doesn't hang right. I don't think they would have put in the money to get a quality looking duster. So this is, I think, the best situation we could have for this figure. The chest part of the duster is molded. It looks like leather. It's got a wash over it. It's got some decently painted silver bits on the collars and on the bottom. They're not quite as sharp as I would like, but if you're not paying attention too much, you barely notice. Again, on the back of the duster, we have those sculpted wrinkles that make it look like it's being worn and it's alive. Moving down, we have the coat tails, which extend down all the way to his ankles, and they are sculpted in a really nice way because they look equally as good in a static pose or an action pose. They work both ways, and that just shows the skill behind the people that worked on this figure. Finishing off the duster part, we do have the tops of his arms. It's basically just the top of the duster. This would be kind of hanging down so it doesn't go all the way down his arm. It's there. I mean, it looks as good as the rest of the duster, but there's not really anything to talk about. I just wanted to point out that it was there. Underneath the duster on the chest, we have what looks like some sort of body armor. The body armor is painted with a wash to make it look worn. It's got a lot of great sculpting in there, and it does a really good job of hiding the torso joint. Below that, we have some sharp silver paint over some, what I guess are rivets or some kind of buttons or something. And below that, we have the bullet belt. He actually has two bullet belts, or one long bullet belt wrapped around his body twice. There's a lot of great sculpting here, but then there's also paint on both the top and the bottom to make it look like there's something silver kind of pushed through a hole. The paint on that isn't quite as sharp again as I would like it, just like his coat. But again, unless you're looking really close, it's not something that you would really notice, but I do want to point that out. Moving back to his arms, he has gauntlets on each forearm. They're mirrored versions of each other, so one is the same as the other, but kind of flipped backwards. There's a lot of great molded detail, a lot of buttons, a lot of panels, whatever we've got a lot of things going on there. He's also got some wires that connect physically from the gauntlets up into his coat, supposedly to control the different functions of his outfit, like the rocket boots or anything else he's got going on hidden inside of his clothes. He also has little nozzles on the bottom. They're used for flame throwing or knockout gas distributing, or even, I think, a stun thing. Moving down from that bullet belt, we have his holsters. I've talked briefly about them, but they are molded in the same kind of soft rubber that his hat and duster are, so they have a lot of pliability, which is nice. They have some molded detail, again, to kind of make them look leathery, but there's no paint on them at all. But the nice thing here is they're not attached to anything but that bullet belt, which means that it doesn't hinder articulation even a little bit. Moving down from the waist, we have his pants, but mostly we have those riding chaps. Why does Cad Bane have riding chaps? I don't know, he's a space alien cowboy bounty hunter. Why wouldn't he wear these chaps? I'm sure they're assless chaps too, because that's just how he rolls. The chaps are molded with a lot of detail, a lot of wrinkles, again, to make them look like they're actually pants. And they do have a nice wash over them to make them look like they're made from sort of a leathery material with some wear in it. Moving down to his ankles, we have his rocket thrusters. They're molded into one solid piece with no paint, but they do look good. And lastly, we have his boots. His boots are ridged for my pleasure. They have a lot of great detail molded right into them, and they look as fantastic as the rest of the figure. So while he does have a lot of fantastic details, there's just some things I want to point out that I don't like. First, there's a little bit of sloppy paint on the duster metal parts and then also on that bullet belt, but that's easily overlooked and forgivable. But the other thing that I'm not really keen on are all of his hoses. The hoses are pretty cool. I'm glad they put the extra effort in, but they do seem a little flimsy. When I got mine out of the package, his hose was disconnected from his right cheek. It does pop back in, but it has a tendency to keep coming out, whereas the left one does not. Also, on his left gauntlet, one of these wires likes to pop off all the time. In fact, I don't think it was attached when I got it. So every time I bend his elbow, that one hose wants to unpop itself. So that can be annoying, and I am a little worried about breaking it, but I'm also not throwing it around the room, so I'm not really going to dock it anything. I just kind of wanted to point that out. And lastly, we're moving on to the want and availability. Did I want him? And the answer is duh. Every January, I put out a list of my most wanted figures I would love to see that year. I don't have any insight to any Hasbro stuff. Hasbro's never once tried to contact me, so I have no idea what they're gonna put out. So when I put Cad Bane as my number one figure I wanted to see in 2020, I had no idea that he was even on the docket of coming out. I'm not saying that Hasbro watches my stuff, but all I'm saying is he was my number one. I didn't think Hasbro would ever make him, and he came out at the end of this year. So I'm super happy to have him in my hand. And of course I wanted him. He was my number one pick of the year. But when it comes down to availability, that's where this figure gets a little spicy. If you want this version that comes with Todo 360, you're gonna have to order on eBay. Like I said earlier in the review, he was briefly available on Hasbro Pulse's website for the US and Canada. He sold out in 15 minutes, which was honestly about 14 minutes longer than I thought he'd last. But if you weren't paying attention, odds are you missed this fantastic figure. So you also missed Todo 360. But again, if you don't care about Todo 360 or you're just worried about getting Cad Bane in general, he is part of the upcoming, actually currently releasing wave of Black Series figures. Although I do want to say, in terms of availability, one of the nice, weirdly nice things about the pandemic of 2020 is that none of the conventions are happening. And while that sucks, I was looking forward to going to Star Wars Celebration. It's nice that Hasbro put all of their exclusives online. I've always had trouble every year getting those exclusives. I didn't really have trouble this year. So it's just a little silver lining on what has generally been the shittiest year I've ever experienced in my life. But please, if you can't get the deluxe edition, don't let that stop you from adding Cad Bane to your shelf. So I'm gonna give him a final score of 4.5 out of 5. And that's actually true if you have the deluxe version or the regular version, because they both have their pros and cons that I feel like kind of cancel each other out. I really wanted to give him that perfect 5. In my heart of hearts, he feels like a 5, but I want to be objective about this. Mainly the lack of Todo 360 in the retail version brings that down in the accessory category, whereas the lack of availability in the deluxe version brings that down in the wants and availability category. What's true for both of is the articulation. I'm mostly just worried about how fragile those hoses are, and I would have liked it if his wrists moved a little bit more. So if you like the Clone Wars, or if you like interesting looking aliens, or you just want a figure in your collection that's not another Luke or Han or Rey, you gotta pick up Cad Bane. Now that we have him, I'd love to see a trooper variant of him where it's a clone trooper body but his head. That was a really good Cad Bane story arc, and I'd love to have a physical representation of that. But I'd also love to just generally have more prequel era bounty hunters. Give me Embo or give me death. So that has been my Cad Bane review. Let me know down in the downstairs area what you thought of it, what you think of the figure. Are you getting it? Are you passing on it? I love to read and respond to all of your comments. I'd also like to take a moment to thank these people here for supporting me on Patreon at a Black Series level or higher. It means a lot to me that you do that, guys, and thank you very much. I also do have a channel membership if Patreon's not your thing. Also, if you could, like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell for more notifications if you want to. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for getting this far. And I'll see you later. Bye.